It's 11 o'clock. We're early. It's 11:30. Thanks for coming, everybody. Thank you. I don't even know why I'm even starting this. I wasn't supposed to.
That's pretty.
You can come back up here after the event. I'm actually going to come up if you're starting. No. Okay. So I guess what we're going to do first is we're going to have a song sung by Montana Rogers, and then we'll have some speakers. My sister and no, Brian. Brian and Brian.
You didn't read the program?
Yeah. And then I'll say something too. So I guess we can begin with Montana.
Maria
Thank you, Montana. That was beautiful. Well, here we are to celebrate Bruce Scott Louvrak. And I need my glasses. There we go. I'll also need some water here in a minute. So when we first asked Bruce what kind of service he wanted, when this day came, he told us that he didn't want any kind of service. And that's Bruce. He said, I don't want a big fuss. And I can just hear Bruce saying right now, don't say a bunch of mushy BS about me. Keep it short and real and go have a beer in my honor. And so, well, we'll get to that beer part soon. But, oh, thank you. Balances. We'll get to that beer part soon, but Troy and Brian and I first had a few things to say. So when I first met Bruce, it was at a family party, and he said, how are you doing, Brian? Want a beer? And so back to that beer again. Except that time it was Miller High Life. Anyway, he said he was friendly and inviting, and he's been like that with me the whole 33 years that I've known him. But it still took a little while to get to know him. For one, I didn't realize at first how hard of hearing he was. And I just knew he was pretty agreeable with me because he would always say yes, even when he didn't know what to say. And I found that it was easier for him to tell stories than it was to hear stories. So he told a lot of good stories. And I'm sure Brian and Troy will expand on a few of those. One thing I think we all know is that as laid back and as easygoing of a guy that Bruce could be, there was nothing wishy-washy about him. He always had an opinion. And sometimes it would even be based on facts. And I noticed his kids share that same trait. But Bruce always spoke with conviction. He valued decisiveness. While he admitted that some of his quick decisions could have benefited from a little more thought, I'm thinking the gutters here, he would always get things done. And as I got to know him better, I learned that he also didn't suffer fools. In fact, if they gave him too much trouble, he would clobber them. That was his term. And now I never saw him clobber anybody, but I definitely heard some good stories about it. And Bruce had a unique way of describing things too. For instance, what we refer to as COVID, he called C-19. And he also wasn't a Trump fan, and so he often called him Monsieur, Monsieur. And what he really meant was Der Fuhrer, like another Hitler. So, and Bruce loved to talk politics. He's always been a Democrat, but after he'd rip on Trump for a while, then he would switch over to also rip on Inslee and Biden. Because to him, they weren't good Democrats, and like I said, he doesn't suffer fools. And don't even get him started on Pete Carroll. He wanted Pete to be fired years before he actually was. Like I mentioned, though, it took me a while to really get to know him, so we would mostly see each other at family get-togethers, and he loved to talk about the weather. That was the first topic. And then we'd branch out into the merits of Coors Light, Miller High Life, and Heidelberg, usually topping it off with some more political and sports discussions. And he enjoyed being around his family, but he often took a back seat at the family functions. And some of it, I think, was because of his hearing, but also he just didn't like to be the center of attention. And it wasn't until I had some more one-on-ones with him that I realized how sharp he really was. He was a voracious reader with a good memory, and he could read people well, and he stayed up on current events. He was better at me than remembering what people were up to, and he was really good about asking follow-up questions about all of that. Later, when I drove him to an appointment or took him out for a beer, I really looked forward to the conversations, and I wished I would have recorded some of those because they were really good. Anyway, talking to him was fun, and I actually learned more about him through his actions. The Bruce I know was always being a helpful guy. He'd be right there to give a grandkid a ride to school or back. He'd take people to doctor's appointments. He would help me with my boat motor, and he would mow a few of his neighbors' yards too. And he would contribute to charities. In fact, I remember him loading up a truck with potatoes for caring for kids, and all the workers there loved him. And by the way, later when we were taking him to doctor's appointments, the nurses loved him too. He just had a way about him. Anyway, if you asked for Bruce's help, I don't remember him ever saying no. And he was also generous. He didn't have a ton of money, but what he did have, he shared. He was a big tipper, and he shared money and his time with family members in need. And his daughter Jo has that trait too, and I've learned from them both. Now, Bruce had a few strong values he lived by. One is what Scott calls the Cajun creed, and what my dad called it, a man is only as good as his word. If Bruce said he was going to do something, he did it. And the other is a strong work ethic. His kids live by that value as well. And anybody who knows Bruce knows that he liked to have things clean and in order, which bordered on being OCD. In fact, it didn't border on it. It was OCD. And I'll just leave it at that for now. So years later, during COVID in 2020, as one of my Christmas presents for Jo, I interviewed and videotaped both Bruce and Dee about their lives. And I didn't know at the time that it was actually a gift to me too. And I felt even more connected with them afterwards. And I got a much better insight into what made them them, as well as how that molded their children into who they are. And it was an unfiltered, insightful, sometimes a little painful, but mostly entertaining conversation. And I noticed that neither of them played the victim, even though they both had their own struggles growing up. Bruce in particular had parents that were absent much of the time, leaving him to fend for his younger sister and brother on his own. And when his dad would return from logging or fishing in Alaska, he was often angry during those years and took it out on Bruce. He didn't have an easy childhood, but he said as he got older, he realized his mom and dad had a rough childhood too. Nobody starts out as a parent with a rule book, and you often learn from how you were treated. Most parents that I talk to end up saying that as they and their kids grow up, they wish they could have a few do-overs for some things. And I know Bruce expressed that he would like to have that too in some cases. But as he got older, concerning his own parents, he got to the point where he accepted their shortcomings and forgave them. And I was impressed by this because I think that would not be easy to do. As he was talking, one of the words that kept coming to my mind as I was doing the interview was survivor. I mean, if you look at Bruce, he had a rough childhood, he lost most of his hearing, he drank, he smoked like a chimney, he had a diet consisting mostly of barbecued red meat and ice cream, and I don't think he ever touched a vegetable. Yet he still lived to be climbing ladders up to the day he died at 90, past the age of most of his friends. And he learned many survival tactics to get along in life, and his kids exhibit some of those traits too. As I mentioned, they all share his strong work ethic, and each shares some unique parts of his personality. For example, with Troy, I can see in him the part of Bruce saying, "Oh well, can't we all just get along?" And with Scott, I see his fun side saying, "Hey, don't get your butt all tangled up in knots, let's party." And with Jo, I see his organized and no BS side. Be tough, don't put up with that crap, don't clobber him. But for being a manly man, Bruce also had a tender and domestic side to him. Public speaking, I tell you. He was into animals in his later years, and he always made sure that hummingbird feeder was filled, and he would make the sugar water himself. And once Jo noticed that he had 5 loaves of bread in the freezer. And when she asked him about that, he said that they were to feed the squirrels. And it wasn't that cheap white bread either. He said that they preferred the more expensive oat nut bread. And he was madly in love with their dog, Chloe. Joe teased him that Chloe got better snacks than they did as kids. And after remodeling his house, he loved those Airwick fresheners. And the house didn't smell like smoke anymore because he'd quit and it got gotten all clean, but he still had 4 of those fresheners in different rooms. And when you'd ask him what he wanted from Costco, he said, "Get me some more of them Airwicks." He loved things to be clean and smell clean. And speaking of cleaning, he was addicted to vacuuming his new floors. One of his favorite gifts was his new vacuum cleaner. And he'd even clean up a little bit before Faye, the house cleaner, came to clean the house. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, Joe found him shining a flashlight on the subway tiles to see if the new product he used was leaving any streaks. As if we'd all be carrying flashlights around the house looking for smudges. Some of his other favorite things to buy these last few years were Mr. Clean Magic Erasers, Dawn Spray Soap, Shout Stain Remover, and as I mentioned, Airwicks. But like I said, Bruce wanted us to keep this short, and I haven't done a very good job of that. So, I just want to say that in closing, that Bruce was a really good guy to me and to his family and friends in the 33 years I knew him. And there's a quote by Emerson. I'll read it. It would be like a prayer, but it's not that serious. But it's nice. It's about what is success. And success is to laugh often and much, to win the respect of intelligent people and the affection of children, to earn the appreciation of honest critics and endure the betrayal of false friends, to appreciate the beauty, to find the best in others, to leave the world a little bit better, whether by a healthy child, a garden patch, or a redeemed social condition. To know even, I knew this was going to, I almost made it. To know even one life is breathed easier because you have lived. This, okay, I'm gonna breathe for a minute. Here, I'll take a breath. This is to have succeeded. Bruce was a success. He left the world a bit better. And I'm going to get through this. Just look at his legacy, which includes being a devoted husband to his wife Dee for 68 years. 68, that's a long time. Yeah. And he's survived by 3 good-looking and successful children and 5 caring and hardworking grandchildren. And 7 adorable and loving great-grandchildren. He led a simple life with a keen intelligence, and I was lucky to have him as a father-in-law and as a friend. And one thing that was obvious to me, even though he wasn't always the type to say it directly, was how he loved his wife and family and how proud he was of all of you. Thank you. Well done.
All right. Looking out here at this group and where we're at, I can guarantee you Papa would say this is way more than what he wants. And in fact, it reminds me of a time, one of the many, when we'd be out on his back deck overlooking Tacoma there, and as he could often do, make a remark about his mortality. And he would say something like, "Well, Brian, I don't see why y'all don't just bury me in a hole back here. But with our luck, I'll die in the winter, and the ground will be frozen. And sure enough, he died in the winter. While the ground's not frozen, we're too old to be digging holes. But this was true to Papa's nature. He was full of hyperbole, but he was modest, and he would never admit to himself or anyone that he was deserving of any of this. But if this family was any indication of who this man was this last week, Papa, we got one of them sorry, not sorry situations here. It's gonna be a little bit more than you wanted or you thought you deserved, because you do. With the exception of today, you might notice that Lovraks are never really that good with affection. It's just not in our nature. Aside from my Adrian and Brady and Lolo, or Kendall and Cameron, or Chris, when he constantly says, "Brian, I love you." He'll keep saying it until I tell him back. I can count on one hand how many times I say I love you. It's something like 3. It's not often. We're good with handshakes, shoulder bumps, or high fives. But stay away from our hugs. They're terribly awkward for us. And honestly, you'll come away feeling probably a little bit worse. 'Cause we're gonna come in there with a weird looking face. It's gonna be awkward. But it's not for a lack of love or empathy. I think we're firm believers in what's implied, because Lovraks show up in ways that don't require hugs or even words. Damn it, D. Papa showed me how we take care of our neighbors using a lawnmower. How we take pride in things we have with head shears or some turtle wax. And how we don't let people suffer through things alone by never saying a word. And this past week has reminded me of something that took me a long time to figure out after my brother Josh passed away. That we are the sum of the people that we choose to share our lives with. Whether it's rummaging through thousands of photos together over pizza to prepare for this memorial, or simply picking up a hammer to help demo an old kitchen. We show up for each other. That's your hug. That's your I love you. That's Papa. And while it's true that we might inherit some less desirable qualities too, and God bless you folks that married a Loverock. It's okay to recognize those parts and still love them too. Because the loving part doesn't really happen until we make the choice to accept the imperfections of others. So if you find yourself missing the man we're here for today, all you gotta do is look for the people around you. You'll find them in a ridiculous, clearly made up story when one of us are grilling and smothering a burnt hot dog in barbecue sauce, give a handshake instead of a hug, or we simply just show up in the quiet ways we're good with a hammer or a lawnmower. So yeah, this was definitely more than Papa wanted and likely to be littered with some exaggerations. But as I stand here today, I really couldn't be more proud to be a Loverock, to be this man's grandson, to be my dad's son, to be my Aunt Jo, my Uncle Scott's nephew, Chris and Jesse's cousin, and Mariana's uncle. So if you ever remember, when you find yourself confronted with questions like, well, the lawn looks dead anyway, I'm just gonna burn it. Should I tip 10 or 20%? Well, my neighbor looks like they could use a hand. The answer is always yes. And if you look on the back of your program, because as Papa Bruce would say, the answer is, well, I don't see why not.
I'm proud to be my son's, having my son, and I'm proud to be his dad. That was wonderful. I'm very lucky. And I'll say, I love you, Brian. I could say it. Yeah, I'll say that too, so that was my 4th time. Thank you for coming. I think when I was asked to write something, I just rambled on and just came up with something, my dad and my memories. And our relationship started in Virginia. That's where I was born. I was 2 or 3 years old. I'm not sure how old I was when I left, but I remember one particular day it was snowing outside, and my brothers and sisters were on the hill sledding. And my dad said, "Do you want to go sledding?" And I said, "Sure." And when we got to the hill, we got on the sled. I was put on my stomach, face first in front of the sled, and he was behind me. And we went flying down the sled, but all I got was snow in my face. And I just cried like hell. And so that was the end of that. And that was one Virginia memory I had. We lived in a little town called Manassas. Another one I had was I wasn't allowed to go across the street to the neighbor's house, and my brother and sisters were all over there. And so nobody saw me leave, and I went over there. And I didn't stay long, but when I was coming back, because I knew I wasn't supposed to be there, my dad was sitting on the curb with one of his friends. And I thought, oh, if I just go like 10 yards away and creep across the street, he wouldn't see me. But of course, I got caught and I got a swat. And those were 2 of the things that I remember him when we lived in Virginia. We also lived in Louisiana, and although my dad was never stationed there, but our family, my brothers and sisters were all born there. I was in Catholic kindergarten school, and I remember making him a tie rack. He didn't wear ties. And then I was staying with my Aunt Connie when my mom was in her accident in the hospital. And I remember my Aunt Connie always liked it when I said, my father, instead of my dad. My father is coming to pick me up. She liked the way I say that. And those were things I remember. I just showing respect, I guess. In Japan, when we lived there, I remember shining his shoes because he had to dress up and get a nickel sometimes or a dime, shining his shoes. But it wasn't easy. You had to get that black tar wax on there and scrub them really hard. I usually did okay. And then also, we had a picnic table in our backyard. And I remember seeing his handwriting on the picnic table, and it said, Tacoma, Washington, and Mount Rainier. And his handwriting was so good. And I never knew Tacoma then. You know, it's just a place that he was from. But I just remember seeing his writing on that picnic table. I also remember we lived on base. They used to play taps every day at a certain time, where the guy would go out there with the horn and they would raise a flag over the flag. And I remember one particular day, what would happen was when they played taps, everybody would stop in their shoes. Military people would stop, they would salute, and people, you know, civilians would put their hand over their heart. And I remember one particular day, it might have been close to the 4th of July, we're at a picnic, and, you know, the taps played, and I saluted. And I wanted to salute, but nothing, you know. After it was done, my dad came over and said, "You cannot salute. This is just for military people and for people being in the service, you know, in the war." And so I got in trouble for that, but I wanted to salute so bad. But I just remember my dad coming up to me and telling me that. I was disappointed. The friends he made in Japan, and the parties he had were, you know, they used to have parties at the house all the time. Well, not all the time, but he made friends with Japanese people. And one in particular was Otomo. And he barely spoke English. You know, he did not speak very good English, but he was a really godsend to our family. He showed us around Japan and so forth. But my dad really bonded with him because they enjoyed Sinatra. I mean, they enjoyed curing beer, and they smoked like crazy. He was a Japanese version of my dad. They got along really well. So another time in Japan in the backyard, we were playing baseball. We had a huge backyard. We had swings back there, bamboo and so forth, and we were barbecuing something, but my dad was catching, and I think one of his friends was pitching. It might have been Bob Weaver or something, and we all used to play baseball back then. And I was up, you know, getting ready to hit, and when the pitch came, I missed. And it was a wooden bat, but I came back and swung and hit him square in the head. I mean, hard. And he just went, "Oh." It was the only time I ever got to hit him. He got a good nod on his head, too. And then, you know, this was in the early 70s. And so, my family's from the South. My dad had a bunch of influences from down south. But my dad was surprisingly kind of progressive in some ways because he let my mom date a black guy. Or not my mom, I'm sorry, my sister, Joe. My sister, Joe. And then it was kind of cool because his name was Michael Jordan. 1973?
Yeah.
Okay. So, if we were down south, that would have never happened always, you know. And he was a really nice guy, too. One day also in Japan, we had a certain day where we were both marked. I was walking home, and that wasn't bad. I was kind of close. You know, remember that gully? You know, it was right before the gully, and the football field and baseball fields were just on the other side. And all of a sudden I was walking, and I got hit by a car, and it blew me off to the side. And about 10 minutes later, the same guy who hit me ran into the big old Buick and crashed it. Now, the Buick kind of suffered a little bit more damage than I did, because I was fine, because the girls' softball team was across the street that saw me get hit, and they carried me home, so that was kind of nice. But it was kind of funny, the Buick got hit. And I remember he also played fast pitch, you know, the big wind-up fast pitch. He batted left and threw right. And he was actually pretty good. And he used to jog a lot too. He used to do that a lot. He worked in communications. Yeah, we lived on an army base, but he was in the Air Force, and he worked up on this big concrete building up in there. And I know he did his job well because one time he was in the paper that was in Morgan City. He did something, I recall he woke up in the middle of the night and had to fix the computer, and he did something good because he was in the paper. He got recognized. In Colorado, where we lived for a short time, he worked up on Cheyenne Mountain in NORAD. And sometimes I remember we would go pick him up, and it was kind of cool to see that mountain with the big old doors going into the mountain. I mean, that was kind of neat. I thought that was kind of cool. My dad worked there. It was also a time that we always had to go to church every Sunday. My mom would drag us, or sometimes Saturday. We'd miss the Partridge Family and stuff, but all of us have to go. And then that gets me thinking. It's like, gosh, my dad got the house to himself, nice and quiet, and not a bunch of kids running around and screaming and yelling. It's just like, I bet you that was a really nice, peaceful time for him. I was kind of jealous. And we'd also, we didn't do many vacations. We'd take Sunday drives around. And I remember one particular day in Colorado, my dad had the big Buick Lakewood 225. It was a big four-door. And I remember seeing one of my friends one time, and he waved to me, and I waved back to him and saw him at school the next day. And he goes, "Man, you must be rich. You guys have a big old car." And little did you know that car had over 180,000 miles on it. In Tacoma, when we got here, I remember the first thing we did was stop at South Tacoma Way, but then also recall, go and see my cousin's house and his brother's house and meeting them for the first time in University Place. And hoping that we would always maybe get a house close by, but we ended up with the house he bought in South Tacoma. It wasn't very big, but he goes, "You know what? All the kids are going to be moving out. Don't need much room." He helped us all with vehicles, I believe. And I think Joe's first car was a Capri. Scott's was a $100 Ford Falcon. I don't remember what Kelly got, but I did remember she got to drive the 70 Buick, the two-door, for a while. And he helped me with like a 73 Chevy truck. I think you remember that truck, Tom. And then he had other cars, like he had a Cadillac one time that he just, I would have liked to have it. It was like a limo, but we just didn't have a place for it, and he just gave it away. He donated it somewhere. His beloved truck, he gave that to my son Brian for quesadilla. Yeah. Pretty big deal. It had a clutch on it though. That's like, you have to have a really strong leg to push that in. And I think that's part of the reason why he got rid of it. He couldn't push it in anymore. And then it kind of started a string of, for me, of buying Chevys, because it's just like I didn't want to disappoint my dad. I was influenced by that. So I had a 73 Chevy truck, I had a Chevy van, I had a 2019 Chevy, I had a 2001 Chevy, and a 2015 Chevy. And that's a span of about 30 years. And I remember when Arlo was going through his phase, and I was over there, and I was talking, and I was kind of maybe in the States getting ready to buy a new truck. And I was talking about, no, I gotta buy a Chevy. And I was saying this in front of Arlo because I think my dad would be disappointed if I didn't. And I remember Arlo looking at me going, "Wow, you listen to your dad? He has an influence?" And I thought, I don't know if my dad probably, I would disappoint my dad if I didn't buy a Chevy. And Arlo I thought was kind of impressed with that. I mean, things he did, I think it was great when he helped Kelly get a home, which was nice. It was close by. And then it was also kind of, when Kelly passed, he wasn't very happy, and he burned the top of Kenny's boat, fiberglass boat, that was just totally black smoke in the neighborhood. I mean, firefighters came, put out the smoke, but they kind of understood about not giving them a fine. But, you know, that wasn't the only thing he did with fire, because like Brian said too, he would burn his lawn. With my dad, growing up, you know, we got a lot of no's. There was a lot of things we really couldn't do that we'd ask that we wanted to do, but he was kind of strict sometimes. But he grew into a grandfather that always says, I don't see why not. And he kind of transformed, and one of the things is like seeing him, when he kind of transformed, is when he saw, when my sister passed away, and we had a father who that was with us, he was impressed with that. And he was so impressed that he became Catholic. And that was something that I thought would never happen. And so, you know, and for my mom, that just made it really great. I mean, they went to church together. He really liked Father Vood and his smoking, holy smoking, because they got along really well. They did a one-on-one, and that was really nice. I mean, when he retired from the Air Force and civil service, I mean, he kind of would wander around on his days. I think he would visit Joe at work just unannounced. He would visit places and not tell people, but he'd also come over during the day too, unannounced, and that was just his thing he did, that he liked to do. Raleigh's was another place that he went to, because it was like an Air Force bar. I mean, he would go there at 10 a.m. in the morning, but he would get up at 4 or 5. So 10 a.m. was like 1 o'clock to us, you know. And so he'd have beer, but it was always a good BS session for him that he did a lot of. If I ever had a job close by, I would call him also and say, hey, do you want to meet for a beer? And we would meet there, and it'd be just me and him on occasion. And Raleigh was always glad to see us there, and he would often give us a beer, free beer. But I think what Raleigh liked was he also liked the family that drank together.
Yeah.
Dad outlasted all the husbands in the neighborhood, which was really surprising because he smoked like my chimney, yes. But when people passed away in some of the yards, he was cutting a lot of the neighbors' yards, and it was mostly Rita's yards, you know, and he took care of Rita's yard as long as he could. And when he kind of retired, that Mark, Rita's son, kind of took over, which is kind of cool, and started cutting Bruce's lawn, which is really nice. And just recently, I kind of went over with him to watch a Seahawks game, and it was just me and him. I mean, it was nice. It was nice and quiet. We didn't even drink any beer, and there wasn't any complaining because the Seahawks were winning. You know, I mean, a lot of times it was like if the other team got a first down or scored a touchdown first, well, this game's over. But it was kind of nice. We just sat there and watched the game. It was quiet, and you know, his days were numbered. It was not anything we talked about, but it was just a nice time right on. He made it to 90 by the grace of my sister. I think OCD really helped, I think, Joe taking care of my dad. The doctor's appointments, the medicines. And I think it was a real important part of his life, those last few years that Joe really helped, and I thank you for that. I know my dad did the best he could and the best he knew how. And I think he was very loyal to you, Mom. And I think that's living to 90, he wanted to take care of you. Thank you guys all for coming. I think it's not too many people, Brian. It's just, I think, the people we would want here. Dad, may you rest in peace, and you may be embraced by God and our past loved ones in the kingdom of heaven. Thank you. Brian touched on points of like our pets. We had a pet, I think we believe in got in Colorado. Yeah. And trying to figure out what to name the dog. And at that time, Benny and the Jets by Elton John was really popular. And my dad really liked that song. So that was the name of our dog, Benny. And so I think we're going to be playing this song.
Play it over and over and over again.
Yeah.
It stopped in my record.
Yeah.
So.
Benny!
Not even a song. Huh? It's an odd song. It's an odd song. Is it fair? Hold on. There we go. What was it? Yeah. So many better Elton John songs. No, you don't have to listen to it. That's how we're going now.
There is a gravesite visit also.
why not? What would Papa Bruce do?
They're a symbol of appreciation for your loved one's faithful and honorable service.
He was military through and through. And worked all the way.
At this time, I believe we're going to have a song. Wherever you want to stand. Mom, we're going to have another song time.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. Was grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Twas grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. When we've been here 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, there's no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.
Here, Papa.
Should throw one down there.
There you go. Or at least pour a little bit.
little christening.
There you go. He would like that.
I think so.
Yeah.
Anybody that has a beer is welcome.
Oh.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello. There's a call. Dun, dun, dun. Oh. Ah, thank you.
Yes. Thank you. I like that.
You have to catch all of this, Ruth. How you doing, Jojo?
Hi.
Thank you, Sarah. That's your name, right, Sarah?
Sarah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You got a good name. I know, I have a drink, I love my correct.
No, is this for wine?
What's up?
Joe, is this for wine?
Yeah, but, there's,
Is this a male bonding moment? Is this a male bonding moment that I should? Love rock moment? Okay.
We were telling each other how much we love each other.
Yeah, it's the whole time, it's so weird.
Well, the new thing's to kiss too. You know that, right?
We're not there yet.
Yeah.
There's food here too.
We have more food than we need. I was gonna say there's some on the deck.
They said like it's for like 30 people. Or 15 people, 15 people. 15 people.
15 really hungry people.